watch me bounce. Hit me with a hot note and watch me bounce. Hit me with a hot note and watch me bounce. When trumpets heat up, give me a rod to beat up.
Bonnie, welcome. A warm welcome to you. The last time
Thank you.
Bumped into you, you just started 9 to 5 at the Savoy, and we bumped into each other, as you do.
Yeah.
In Pret, round the
In
corner.
Pret, next door, where I lived the whole time.
And, I mean, it's so sad seeing all London's theatres frozen in time and still adorned with all the signage that was as though the shows that were playing, the clock stopped. And do you know what I mean?
It is. It's sort of like the moment of Sleeping Beauty when she's pricked her finger and the place goes to sleep.
Yeah.
I haven't been up to London for quite a few months now, although I live just on the edge of. But I did go up during the sort of, I think it was just before the major lockdown happened. And it was quite eerie. I found it so sad and quite daunting, it felt quite dangerous. I don't really know why. The fact that there was nobody there.
Yeah.
It felt like an apocalypse, literally. That some outer space spaceship had come down and literally sucked out all the people. It was very odd, really odd. I didn't like it.
Well,
I
live right in the centre, and during lockdown I would go out for a long walk every morning, and I would walk down the entire length of the Mall and not see another soul. I mean, that really is apocalyptic. But look, people are, I think it's wonderful the way London is. I know we're in Zone 2 at the moment, we're in Tier 2.
Tier 2, yes.
But it is behaving almost as normal, but people are being sensible, and that is how shows are returning to theatres, and that excites me, and I know because we're going to have to live with this for a lot longer, I fear.
I know. I mean, I think the fact that there doesn't seem to be a light at the end of the tunnel, or at least the tunnel is still very long, is just really devastating and hard to weather sometimes. I don't know about anyone else, but I don't know how you feel about this, Edward, but I feel like my emotions or my skin has got so much thinner emotionally, and that other things that used to I could take in my stride, that didn't matter at all, are now... I flip, the pendulum swings very quickly, and I'm either sobbing or hysterically laughing. It's almost a sort of a sense of madness that you think, ooh, or you just sort of don't have that breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4 naturally anymore.
I think we're all a lot more fragile, and I think that's I was watching the kids can sort of take it in their stride more. I was watching Sam Tutty accept his Olivier, and he said, when we were told the show was off and we were in lockdown, he said, I said to all my mates in the cast, see you in 2 weeks. 7 months later.
I know. I mean, I think we all thought that. I mean, I was doing 9 to 5 at the time, and I had been in the show for well over a year, so I was coming to the end of my stint that was only supposed to be a few weeks in the first place. So it had gone on, and I was quite badly injured and tired, and there was part of me that thought, actually, how lovely to have that moment to actually rest up, to do what I probably should have done a long time before, and take that moment of break. Then I had that flip where I suddenly was very frightened and thought, what is going to happen, what is happening, the reality of the situation and the importance, the first factor was people being sick, dying, all this, the danger of the actual virus. But then as it's gone on and on and on, I mean, it just swings, doesn't it, all over the place. You just don't know how we're ever going to, there are other things that have now been created from it, the whole financial aspect of it, the fact that you then start to think, can I actually do what I trained to do? Maybe I should do what Rishi says and retrain. No. You do start to go, no, I can do what I can do, but it's very hard. And for the young ones, there's an element of that wonderful innocence and ignorance of youth, which is great, which we desperately need to hold on to. But at the same time, you worry for them because you think, that bubble's going to burst if they ever get going in the first place. You know, someone like Sam Tutty, that's fantastic to see that success and that wonderful joy and confidence. But there are so many other students who have graduated with, you know, a Zoom call and an email diploma and a 40 grand debt, with no prospect on the horizon of it actually getting any work. And that I find really daunting and hard to support, you know, hard to encourage.
Well, it's down to us all, and we all need to take responsibility. I think rather than being told what to do, we should do what we think is sensible, and it will come back. I'm an eternal optimist. And look, you've got a new member of your family, haven't you? You've got a puppy.
Yes, I did the lockdown puppy thing. Do you know what it was as well? It was so funny because, you know, I mean, we were all we started off with clearing out our cupboards and our, you know, getting our lives together and going, wow, you know, this is like, you know, then of course we were all doing sort of exercise in the living room trying to keep going. Yeah. And then I remember we got to, it must have been July, because I know that it was on Disney Plus, was Hamilton, and I watched it. And I just saw that brilliance of all the stuff coming together, as it does in theatre particularly, on that one moment. You know, that the stage manager says, you know, lights up at 1, LXQ1, go. Orchestra go, and suddenly this roller coaster goes off, and 2.5 hours later all those different elements, I'm not just talking about those on the stage, I'm talking about those in the entire building, all that has come together for that audience to sit and watch and escape and not know half of it that's gone on, because that's our job, is to make it look easy, and you know, it takes far more than one person to stand on a stage. But, and that sort of, it got me, it really got me. And then the next day, I think it was Alan Carr and Melanie Sykes had their radio show, and they were celebrating theatre. And I thought, how wonderful. And then I thought, life is too short, we have to live it now. I talked about getting a puppy always. And I thought, well, this is going to go on a long time. I'm never, hopefully, touch wood, I'm really grabbing onto wood now, will not have this period to be able to nurture and deal with a little tiny puppy, of which was even more hard work than I even realised. And it was also something for my daughter, who's now 20, to have something else to nurture, to take her mind off it, to have that positivity of actual life growing in front of your eyes. Yeah. And so we got a puppy.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And is it as much of a challenge as bringing up a teenage daughter?
Yeah, pretty much, actually, yeah. Yeah, it's different, but it is a challenge. I've got this little, her name's Poppy, and she's a little Maltipoo, so she's a crossbreed between a Maltese poodle and a miniature poodle. Yeah. She's hypoallergenic and all that stuff. She's completely adorable, particularly at the moment, because she's fast asleep in front of me. But she does like to play. She went through a phase of eating my ankles, which was the most painful thing ever, and I've got a picture of myself with my pyjama bottoms that she's just jumped up and bitten, and I look like I'm shredded.
Enjoy.
But you know, I have talked to more people in my area in the last few weeks with this puppy than I ever have done in the last few years. Sometimes you don't want to, but most of the time it's just lovely to go out there and somebody says, hi, you know, what's your puppy, blah, 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 and you talk. I've got a whole new community of friends, really, through my job.
They really are.
Yeah.
Now, the last show I saw you in the West End was a show which kind of resonates with the difficult times we're in now, because it's set in difficult times, and that, of course, is 42nd Street. And that's been a big chunk of your life, because you played both Peggy and Dorothy Brock. Yeah. And that must have been emotional, coming back to the Lane to do Dorothy. Hugely.
I mean, it more than just 42nd Street. Drury Lane was where I made my West End debut at the age of 7 in Gone with the Wind, the musical.
Which I never saw. It was... I really am curious, because I was, you know, growing up then myself, and I had wonderfully inspired grandparents who would take me to the theatre a lot, but for some reason we didn't get to see Gone with the Wind. I'm
Well, it
furious.
was on for a while because it was Harold Fielding produced it, and Harold Fielding did not believe that critics or anybody else could stop a show from running, and he was brilliant. But it did not get the greatest reviews ever, and it was very long, it was miserable. It was actually ahead of its time. It virtually sung through, and very, spectacular, but dark, it's not necessarily all curtains, as they say.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just did a tiny part in it. I played Bonnie Butler, the daughter of Scarlett O'Hara and Rhett Butler, and I was 7 years old, and I made my entrance in exactly the same place then as I did when I came on for Dorothy Brock that many years later, almost 50 years later. That I found very emotional. I've appeared at the Lane since, many, many times, but somehow on this occasion it meant so much more. I played Peggy Sawyer on the tour of 42nd Street many moons ago, about 25 years ago, and apparently I'm the only person who's ever done both roles.
That's really interesting. Gosh, no, I didn't know that. I mean, it's a piece that typifies everything that I've always loved about you as a stage performer, because it is from that golden era of musicals, all those wonderful Harry Warren numbers, and of course the apotheosis of tap dancing.
Yes,
beyond the scale, I mean.
And underneath it all is this desperate time, this very dark time, and where theatre is there to cheer everybody up.
Yep.
But at the same time, it has to make money, because no one's got any money. Yes, it is very, very relevant, frighteningly relevant to the period that we're in now. And there are so many fantastic lines. I remember I went to see the opening night when it was on this last time. I was in EastEnders at the time. I didn't have any thought about being in it. It didn't strike me. I was just so pleased I could go to the opening night, because generally our schedules were so unpredictable. We didn't know if we could do anything. I went to see this show, and I sat there with an audience full of critics and basically people who'd been in the show before. There were so many people who had been in the show in its different incarnations. All of us sitting there mouthing the lines and doing the tap routines while we sat and watched, and adoring this dark humour that runs within that script. Yeah. It's very telling, it's very truthful, and it's not all showbiz. It's saying the harsh reality and the harsh reality of life, and how people are using other people for other things, and blah, 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 and ultimately all we want is to be seen and heard and loved and all those sorts of things. And there it is, wrapped up in this wonderful package. And then what I thought I was so impressed with was the fact that I actually saw Randy Skinner, who was the choreographer on this occasion, because obviously it was Gower Champion who, this whole show had so much tragedy attached to it, because he died on the opening night on Broadway many years ago. Anyway, so Randy had recreated the choreography, and he said something that I thought was really very wise. He said that he only came back to the show with the understanding that he could add to it, that he could give the iconic moments, when the curtain goes up and you just see all those tap dancing feet going at it, banging out at the audition. But also that he created some new iconic moments, which he very much did. Because he said that when he was young, he went to see Maine as a young boy, and he saw the original production, and that made him go into the industry. And then they recreated it, I think it was 1986, once again, but exactly the same as it was before, and it seemed so much smaller and less impressive, because obviously our tastes had grown, or the world had grown. Indeed. And somehow you've got to give people what they want, and then a little bit more.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I was there on the opening night too, and there were so many people from the business in the audience, and I remember Maureen Lipman being beside herself. She spent most of the show on her feet.
Yes.
And it for anybody who's ever smelt show business, that piece, as you say, both the darkness and the light and the excitement and all those things are in it.
And humility. It takes the mickey out of itself as well, the whole genre, which is, but does it so brilliantly. I mean, and that's why I was so thrilled to do it. I mean, it couldn't have been more different to EastEnders. You know? And then I came back to this. It meant so much to me. I thought the show was just glorious and, you know, so pristine. There was never a sequin out of place in that show. And that took so much work. We used to have backstage tours because, to be honest, seeing what went on backstage in what we called the village, where everyone would get changed, was another whole show unto itself. The expertise was just brilliant, and I just was so surprised and proud to be part of it. And then what really was the icing on the cake was that they suddenly turned around and said, let's film it. And that was terribly exciting, because now it's there forever.
It's there forever.
Yeah,
absolutely.
and sadly we lost Mark Bramble before the film came out, but at least that's there. His legacy is there for everyone to see.
Yeah. Just remind us of your original name, Bonnie, because it is so wonderful.
What, my real name?
Your real name, yeah.
Oh my God, my real name is Bonita Melody Lisette Langford.
There you are.
It's a long one, isn't it?
It's amazing, and it's oozing with showbiz, and you can tell that your mum. Your mum was a dance teacher, and your great aunt.
She still is. She's 90, and she's still teaching.
You're kidding.
She hates the fact that she has to have kids separate. She loves, at the moment, you know, her school is all about quantity. She has hundreds of kids in hundreds of sequins singing big songs out loud, and of course she can't put them anywhere near one another, and she has to restrict the numbers, and she just cannot deal with it at all. And putting masks on, she's like, oh, I don't like it. But, you know, she's still going.
That's
she's
amazing.
still doing it.
That is utterly amazing. I mean, you've always been there in my life, in the sense that long before I entered journalism or was involved in the theatre at all, you were always there from childhood. And
that's a good thing.
I mean, the big question is, how did you? Because you've grown up into yourself. You've developed your career in all sorts of interesting ways. How is it you managed to survive the childhood thing, Bonnie? Because, you know, others haven't. I mean, you think of Lena Zavaroni and people like that. I mean, what do you think it was? Was it your family, your mum?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was, you know, for all that sort of showbiz, from the outside it looks like showbiz. In fact, what we have is a family, a strong family. And at the time when I was sort of doing an awful lot, you know, maybe sort of in Gypsy and things like that, my sisters were, they were 10 years older than me, 10 and 8 years older than me, so they were very much into their own thing. My eldest sister was at that point at the Royal Ballet School. In fact, both my sisters were at the Royal Ballet School at that point. There was a point when all three of us were there, and that was my poor father, the expense of it all was unbelievable. And so he was always out. He was the normal one of the family. He had a business that he ran basically to sort of keep us all going. He was the normal one, and there was this great sense of normality. And I think also there was this tremendous love for what we do, but it was all about the training. It was about learning your craft. My great aunt had been a ballerina with Anna Pavlova, and had also toured the world with her own act doing The Dying Swan. But it was always about learning. It was always about perfecting your craft. It wasn't about fame.
Yeah.
Fame didn't come into it.
You're so right. That has changed so much. And yes, the craft is what's held you in good stead for so many years.
Well, it gives you longevity, if nothing else. It gives you the opportunity to have at least some kind of technique, to be able to do 8 shows a week or more, to be able to turn up on time, say the line, stand in the right place and do it. And that means an awful lot. Yes, you've got to be talented, but you've also got to be able to be talented when they say go. You can't do it when it suits you.
Well, the number of kids you see in this reality world we live in, reality TV world, when they're asked what they want to be, and they say famous.
They say rich and famous.
Yeah.
And they don't go together.
How wise you are.
They don't really go together. I mean, I've known this a long time. And they shouldn't be, you know... This is what gets me about this whole situation, is that, you know, they say, Oliver Dowden, he says, oh yes, I know you want to get back to your passion. No, yes, okay, yeah, it is your passion. It's not a hobby,
Yes.
it's a job.
Yes.
And when it becomes a job, it also becomes a very different thing. It's not about getting up, you know, people used to say to me, oh yes, you're always getting up and singing and dancing to the relatives. And I go, never. That's why I find it so difficult now when people say, will you do something on Zoom?
Oh, no.
I can't perform in my living room. I don't like it.
Good
I need to be in the right place.
Good for you.
I
Good
just
for you.
find it really strange. Of course we're feeding our ego in a way. Of course we are. I'm not going to say, oh, I don't do it for anyone else. You know, oh, I do it for everybody else. But there is something about it where for me, it's not about serving something within me. It's about going to a place that then tells a story that moves other people, helps people
Yes.
feel. I don't know. It's not just sort of something that you do to feed your ego. You do it,
No.
and then you do it to feed your kids.
And also there's another element, we've talked about this before, and that is the issue of shyness. And, you know, which is so common among performers. Performers, we're the best people in the world to be able to disguise it. People say to me, when I say that I was painfully shy, only child, they say, well, you've made up for lost time, haven't you? And I say, but no, I'm shy even now.
Yeah, me too.
And that's,
Me too.
That says something about sensitivity. It says something about vulnerability. We, as performers, that people are, and of course, without technique, you're nowhere.
No, but also, you know, you've got to hold on to that. The thing is that ultimately we're all playing real people. I mean, I think through this lockdown thing, I've been looking at social media a bit. I only have Twitter, although I keep saying I should get Instagram. But I don't know. I think if I had started in this day and age when there was all that kind of social media and Instagram out there, I think it would be a lot harder. I think that it's a different business now. I think people brand themselves a lot more. I think it's a lot harder to actually just be an actor. I remember seeing television a few years ago when someone introduced Ewan McGregor as a celebrity actor. No, he's an actor. He's an actor. And yes, you become celebrated. That's the old-fashioned meaning of the word, really, isn't it? But you don't become famous for being famous. If you do, it's short-lived. You've got to have something to back it up. Well, I know.
They're called influencers.
Oh, I know.
And you know, I've talked about this with performers, many performers. I talked about it in a show I did with Patti LuPone, and I said, you know, the Instagram.
That was a name drop, Edward. That was a name drop.
That was massive.
It was
wasn't
quite
it?
a big one.
There's
It was a good one. I worked with Victor Spinetti, and he used to name drop. Well, his main name drop then was Marlene Dietrich and Elizabeth Taylor, and they were big. And he'd go, and he'd do it like he was dropping a huge baseball, and he'd go, boom, name drop. And that was one of those.
Yeah, there's a hole in my floor as we.
Yeah.
But we were talking about Instagram casting because it's not just a joke, it's a reality. That there are people casting shows and films who look at the influencers and how many followers people have because that's where their audience might lie.
Yeah, but I think in their sort of defence, that has always been the case. It just hasn't been social media. It's been something else.
Yeah.
You know, ultimately, you know, you would have Noel Coward and Gertrude Lawrence in something because they brought their audience. And yes, okay, they were brilliant artists and he was an amazing writer and all those sorts of things, but, you know, they had other things to back it up. But you have got to have that area where you bring people in. And through bringing people into a show or into a theatre or to watch something on the television, yes, you are therefore influencing people, and that has, I think, always been the case.
It's very wise.
That has always been the case, but I think what's different now is that so often people are influencers, but they don't have something to back it up when they bring the people in. You got to bring the people in, and then you've got to show them something.
Yes.
Then you've got to prove that you can do it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who go, oh, why should people who are famous get, you know, these parts? Well, because they're there for another reason as well as being able to do the job. Yes. Because their value is the monetary value they bring in, and the with people coming to see the show.
Yes.
And through people coming to see a show, all those other people are being employed.
That's the crucial thing, though. You do have to be able to deliver. And
Yes.
in some cases, I'm afraid, the casting, the swing will go one way because of the influencing, and they'll choose the lesser of the talents because of the influence.
I guess it's another talent.
Dangerous.
It's a talent to bring business in. But yes, I mean, I prefer a level playing field. I prefer it I love it if somebody who's well known suddenly has this hidden talent that we didn't know was there and is able to reveal something, and therefore a new area has been discovered in this person's life, and it brings a whole new thing, a whole new genre. But I'm very wary. I'm also very wary of the fact that, young people have fed this whole thing, and we'll get an Instagram and you'll be famous and you'll get things for free and then you'll be invited to things, and it's a lifestyle.
It is.
It's not a job.
No,
well, it is a job.
Yeah.
It is a job now.
Yeah.
But then, who's going to be the next new person? You're constantly then fighting to stay in that position against a whole world of other people suddenly coming up.
Well, that's the sadness, isn't it? Because you outstay your welcome, and they move on to the next influence. Okay, so my mum took me to see Angela Lansbury in Gypsy at the Piccadilly Theatre in the dark ages of 1973. My goodness, we were in the second row. It's funny, little did I know then, one day, I would enjoy close encounters, and here's another name drop, with both Lansbury and Langford.
Hers is a much bigger name drop than mine. Yeah, the two L's.
I mean, my goodness. I remember it so vividly from the moment she walked down the aisle with the dog.
Jowsy.
I tell you, I was so disappointed when Patty did it and it wasn't a real dog.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
I mean,
well, I went to see her do it, and she had her slippers on. There was this, it was so fun. I mean, it was hysterical. I went to see it. I haven't seen all productions because I am very loyal to my first production. I'm very loyal to Angela, and it just, I don't know, nothing's quite the same. And so I went to see it. I did go to see it with Patti LuPone, and there was this announcement before the show. There's, ladies and gentlemen, we regret to inform you that Miss LuPone, and then the whole audience went, ah, as if she was off, will be performing in her isotonic slippers as she has a back injury. And everyone sort of laughed. Oh. She walked on, she had her slippers on the whole way through. But then she started rolling around on the floor in the middle of one of the numbers, and I'm thinking, well, that back doesn't look that bad.
There's no stopping her. I can tell
Good.
You. There's no stopping that woman.
Excellent.
And I mean, tell us a little bit about, as a young girl then, what being around Lansbury with that stellar career already behind her.
Well, it was, I was 8 years old. How much do you see? Well, actually, I was one of those kids that was very quiet. I was very shy. And I was a bit of a sponge and would just watch everything. And what was so incredible about that whole production was it was the first time that Arthur Lawrence, who wrote it, had directed it. And Sondheim, it was Fritz Holt and Barry Brown had produced it, and Edgar Lansbury had come in with some of the production money as well. And Angela had not been on stage for quite some time, and she hadn't been in London since I don't know if she'd ever been in London, actually. I think it was maybe her first time of actually performing in the West End, because, of course, she left when she was in her teens. But she... Oh, my goodness. The lessons that I learnt in that rehearsal room... Arthur Lawrence, for a start, would call us the small adults. We weren't separate from the company at all. We had our notes with everybody else. Wow. We were called the small adults, but, and obviously I think it was tempered. Certain language, I'm sure, was tempered. Not all the time. And, we were very much expected to be equal members of the company and behave accordingly in a completely positive way, but also you knew that you didn't cross the line. Angela was... just a dream. She is a dream. She's the most extraordinary woman off stage, probably even more than on, because she would be so kind and thoughtful. For example, we had the whole rehearsal period in Clapham in a territorial army base. It was very rough. And we went into the theatre. Oh, the glamour. We went into the theatre. It was quite tense. Julie Stein was thrown out of the theatre because he ran down from the back of the stalls during the band call shouting, "That's not how you play my music," grabbed a trumpet off the trumpeter and tried to blow it, and the whole of the orchestra walked out. Stuff like that. You just go, really? Anyway, so we came to our first, our open dress rehearsal, which was a prose matinee. It was all very, very exciting. And the audience went completely wild, absolutely wild. And we went to the auditorium afterwards for our notes session with Arthur Lawrence. And we all sat there thinking that he would go, "Wow, you were amazing." And it was totally the opposite. He absolutely hauled us all over the coals. He said, "These are real people that you are playing. They just happen to be in a theatrical environment. You fell for every cheap joke. You fell for every laugh, every response from the audience. This is not, a panto. This is a deep, heartfelt show that just happens to be set in a theatrical environment, but actually it's about people. You need to be real people, and you must not be caricatures." And Angela puts her hand up and says, "Arthur, I'd just like to say at this point that I think being, the leader of the company, I will take full responsibility for that, because I think I was the biggest culprit." And we all just fell in love with her even more than we had already.
Yeah. She's a total realist. I remember doing a couple of radio shows with her in her home in Ireland, actually, overlooking the ocean. We did 2 one-hour shows, and we were talking about Anyone Can Whistle, which was her Broadway debut. And she said, honestly, if it had lasted more than 9 performances, she said, my voice would have been wrecked for good, because I didn't know what I was doing. It was the first time I'd ever sung in a show. And then you listen to the recording of Mame, which came just a few years later, and you see the work she's done to get the mix right, to, she's a model.
A complete model, and as you said, we're going back to training again, going back and learning your craft. And remember, we didn't have microphones then. We had floor mics, float mics. We didn't have individual mics. So you had to sing out, Louise, literally.
Absolutely.
But it was brilliant, and to be there with those greats set me up for life. It really did. It made me very choosy. It can sometimes make me feel, oh no, now I know, once you've been with the best, it's very hard sometimes to adapt, but you have to keep that within you and set your own version of how to work within a situation that you're in, and try to make the best of whatever situation you're in, knowing that you've had that opportunity to see how brilliant people work, and there's not the drama, there's not the stress, there's you're expected to deliver, especially with Americans. If they don't tell you you're doing it right, then you're doing it right. They'll only tell you if you're doing it wrong, and that can be harsh, but you have to deal with it, and then you get the rewards. You get the satisfaction of knowing that you've pleased people who are worth pleasing as well.
Didn't you have a Muhammad Ali story around this time?
Thank you. Well, I then, because of the time that it was in 1973, I was only 8 years old. I was only allowed to be in the show for 6 weeks, because that's basically 40 days. The crazy part was that we did loads of previews, about 10 days of previews, and previews don't count. I mean, it's ridiculous. They're still performances, but they say, oh no, that doesn't count. That's supposed to be rehearsals. So you were only allowed to do about 6 weeks of a show straight off. So I had to leave on July the 14th. I've never forgotten it. Couldn't understand why I was leaving. Terribly upset. The producers, Barry Brown and Fritz Holt, called my parents into the company office when I was leaving to say thank you very much, and would they consider me going to New York with the show when it goes there the following year. And I remember sitting in the car with my older sister, with Pet, saying, what are they going in there and talking about? And then they came out and they said, oh, that was nice. They've asked if you'd go to America with the show. Isn't that lovely? Not thinking that it was actually a genuine request.
Yes, yes.
A few weeks later, the producers called and said, have you considered this option? And then, all sorts of things happened. It became a very big deal. I was made a ward of court, and I went to America with the show the following year. I mean, fortunately, I was still short. I mean, that's one good thing, because I did the stagger through on the first day of rehearsals in New York, and I've never had such a huge hug from anyone as I did from Arthur Lawrence, who came over to me, and he was not a hugger. Yeah. And he came over and he squeezed me, and he went, oh, thank God, I suddenly had a vision of you being too old and too tall, and you couldn't do it. Yeah. Anyway, so I went to America with the show. We toured to 14 different cities, ending up on Broadway. And on one of these trips between theatres, I think we were going from somewhere to Philadelphia. We stopped off, we had to do a transfer, a connection flight. And we were walking through the terminal, and there was Muhammad Ali. I mean, he wasn't just sitting there on his own, he had a whole entourage with him. But I think travelling with a big show looks a bit like the circus, and we created our own attention as well. And there were 7 other children in the show as well. And we were allowed to go and say hello to Muhammad Ali. What was so funny was that, the week before we were in St. Louis. And St. Louis Muni is this huge, 14,000-seater theatre, open-air theatre. So you can't use any of the scenery, and they create the scenery and they sort of Velcro it to these huge booms. And on the side of the stage there was a light that was apparently, it was putting off Angela when she was doing Rosie's turn, so she asked for it to be switched off. I went on for my curtain call. We all walked off, and I walked straight off into this big boom because the light wasn't on. And I got a black eye. And I was in hospital, through the night, with my understudy following me. She came with me, with her mum. Oh, you're not going to be... I went in the next day to do the show, and she was wearing my costume. I went, I'm really sorry, but you won't be needing that. Fortunately, we're still great, great friends, and we're recently in Chicago together. But anyway... so I had this black eye when I met Muhammad Ali, and much was made of the fact that you didn't get a black eye from the show, you got a black eye from Muhammad Ali because he punched your eye.
Wonderful, wonderful, yeah. Show business. Now, I have this theory that it really doesn't matter how good you are as a singer and a dancer. It's the ones with the acting chops that make the difference, where you get the whole package comes together. And watching you in EastEnders, and we mentioned it earlier as Carmel Kazemi, a show not without its weekly dramas.
Daily.
But it was remarkable watching you, because it was like watching someone entirely different. And you had really, really difficult plot lines, the death of your son. And it was remarkable what you did in that show. Is there some chance you could be back?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't been killed off, I don't think. I think my character's still in Dubai. Yeah. Stuck there now with Corona. I don't know. That one, I would never have predicted that job. It literally came out of the blue. And I ended up staying 3.5 years, and I enjoyed it tremendously. And it's but it is a funny, different world. You're constantly learning, because they work at a speed of knots. They really do. They churn out the stuff so quickly, and the actors there particularly have to just, as I said to one of them when I first joined, I said, I don't know how I'm going to remember all this. That's it. I said, I don't know how I'm going to learn all these lines. And he said, you don't learn, you remember. Yeah. And then you delete. Yeah. You have to. You literally, you get very quick. That muscle memory really starts to work. And you have to delve deeply very quickly. But, as all actors would say, it's fantastic to get something you can get your teeth into. It's much nicer to play something that really has a huge arc to it than just constantly being sort of jolly and, what's on the market today. It was very daunting to do, but I do believe with everything, the one thing you have to be is 100% committed to what you're doing. If you're outside of yourself looking in, then you're not doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's wonderful. You know, I see you were talking about training and singing, you know, Angela singing and people training and all this sort of thing. It is so important to be trained. It really is so important, because it's part of your sort of backbone. It gives you that bed on which to lie, the foundations. But ultimately, it isn't about who's got the best note, who can sing the sweetest sound, who can kick their leg the highest or do 25 turns. It means nothing if it doesn't have a thought behind it.
Of course. And that's exactly what the point I was trying to make. At the moment, Kush, has
my other son,
your other son, has some very strong storylines going. He's getting.
Oh, I gather he's getting
gambling.
into debt, isn't he?
Yes.
Gambling.
So
Oh,
mother could come to the
mother
rescue.
could come back and say. I don't know. I have absolutely no idea. I mean, I don't know any of the team there anymore. I mean, I know some of the team, but I don't know any of the bosses. It's amazing to be part of, but it's this huge machine, and ultimately the show is the star, and that's the end of it. It really is. But I have such admiration for everyone who works there, because it's speed. It really is speed. And you know, I remember when I first went in there, and I thought, you know, these it's not just the people who've got the main story. It's how you're furnishing somebody else's story and basically getting out of their light and their shot and things like that, because there isn't that time that you have on film to take the time. You know, you have to think quickly, and I love that.
And can you imagine now what they're having to do with social distancing and glass screens and goodness knows what? I mean, how on earth do they make it look as convincing as they do? Looking back on one of the joys of probably the only advantage of getting older is that you remember certain shows. I remember going, for example, to one of the previews of Cats, not knowing anything about this rather odd show that was about to open. And I remember coming out of the interval completely speechless. I thought,
is that good or bad?
No, I just thought it's like nothing I've ever seen. It is so thrilling, so extraordinary. And there's a reason why these things become landmarks in musical theatre. But that show particularly, and of course, you know, what a cast it was. My goodness me. I mean, you've all, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I was 16 at the time. Yeah. 16. I wouldn't even think about it now. You know, you're 16, everyone's still just, oh, do we go to sixth form or university? I didn't think of it. I just wanted to get out and work. And I was so lucky to get in it. I did 5 auditions, though, and I had to do a Shakespeare piece for Trevor Nunn. For a show like that. But it was, you know, in fact, over lockdown, I'm constantly saying, oh, I'm writing my book, because I'm coming up to 50 years in the business now. And, I keep saying I'm writing it, and I've tried bits and bobs, and I did actually I did what I call a brain dump about Cats. And I wrote 8,500 words, and I haven't even got to the first night yet. It was very eventful. Gosh. It was a very eventful time.
You can say that again. I mean, you know, things like Elaine Page's late arrival. I mean, it's hilarious. Didn't you two do the workshop of Starlight Express together?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Can you imagine Elaine on roller skates? No.
Well, as soon as it went to roller skates, we all went, thank you very much and goodbye. Little did I know, years later, I'd be blooming ice skating. But so I mean, that was one of the lovely things we all did, and it was Richard Stilgo, and I can't remember, Jeff Shankly was in it. There were quite a lot of us were in it. Paul Nicholas was in it. We all went to Andrews, and we had a lovely time singing Starlight Express. Then Trevor came down and saw it and said, I think it'd be marvellous if we were on roller skates, and we all went,
yes,
sorry,
bye. No, I remember one of the things Elaine has always said was, she said, it's all very well doing these workshops, she said, but you never get cast in the role you play.
Well, that's what's so different about New York, as you know. Yeah. If you do a workshop, you get first call.
That's interesting.
So that's
isn't it?
why you
Yeah.
get amazing people. So I did a workshop in New York a few years ago with Tyne Daly, another extraordinary lady who
Isn't
elected
she
herself as the
just-
equity dep on the first day because she said, well, no one else will do it. And if anyone else does it, they'll think they're going to get fired. So yeah, I thought it was just brilliant. And the people in that room were incredible. It was ballroom. Jerry Mitchell directed it. And I thought, how have you got all these people in this room? And it is because you get first call. Yeah. They cast workshops as if they're doing the show, because once you've done the workshop, you can be with the show through its entirety. If they don't want you and they decide to recast, there's a financial remuneration involved, and it encourages people to be there from the very word go,
great.
and you then become part of the fabric of the piece, because it is important. Actors do bring so much. Every element does. Can you imagine if Cats had not been choreographed by Gilly, or John Napier hadn't created that design? I mean, that was absolutely phenomenal and iconic, and entering upwards, particularly with it being at the New London, now the Gilly Lynn Theatre, you go up into this mad world.
Yeah.
If it had just been a Pross Arts show, it would have been just like, strange people dancing around in leotards.
Well, I mean, the whole, as you say, the whole experience was so different that people now who are familiar with Cats have no idea how innovative it was at the time. No. And that being in a new theatre was part of it as well, that kind of weird environment. Have you had, are there roles that you have loved more than any, favourite roles, and some that you still covet and haven't given up on playing?
Yeah, I've always been one of those people that has said I've not given myself ambitions to say I must do this by the time I'm whatever age, because so often life doesn't deliver that way. You can put things out into the universe, you hope they come back, but generally they'll come back in a different way, and I always like to say they generally come back better. I have been in things and I've been involved with things that I would never have imagined, and I'm so thankful for that, and I'm so grateful for that. I think there are parts that I might, especially thinking over lockdown, used to think, what could I do that I haven't done? I think I'd quite like to have a go at Mrs. Lovett, actually. In Sweeney, I'd quite love a go at that.
Idea.
I'd quite like that, and I suppose I probably would like to do Mama Rose at some point. Yeah. I've always thought I shouldn't, but you know what? It is part of my DNA.
No, you should do that. That is definitely a role. I was going to say that.
And maybe Miss Hannigan. I haven't done, I always used to say I wasn't in Annie, I was never, because I used to have stand-up rows with people who'd say, I saw you in Annie, you were there with your red curly hair, and I go, well, first of all, that was a wig on Andrea. Secondly, I went to America to do Gypsy. Andrea McArdle was the exchange to come here and do Annie, which was wonderful. And I'd never been in Annie. But you know what? There's part of me that goes, I quite like Miss Hannigan. She's so naughty and funny and baddie.
She's a scene stealer, isn't she? She's a show stealer. I'm doing an event with Sheila Hancock in a couple of weeks.
Oh, wonderful! Both those parts she's played, hasn't she?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a career and a half. My goodness me!
Tell me about it.
But I love the idea of Mrs. Lovett, because I think one of the things about Mrs. Lovett that's so interesting, and Patty talked about this as well, is I remember I got to know her when she came to London to do Masterclass, which of course Tyne Daly did so wonderfully in recent times.
Yeah.
And I did a piece for The Independent, and we just bonded, we just got on, and she said she didn't have a very happy time doing Masterclass because it didn't get well reviewed here, and nobody came. She was playing to like 200 people a night at the Queen's Theatre.
Can you imagine?
Absolutely. But she was doing a concert version of Sweeney, and she called me up and she said, I have such problems with the Cockney accent. She said, it's and she said, I was terrible when I did it in Oliver, she said, and it hasn't got any better, she said.
How lovely of her to be so honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said, no, it's not the Cockney accent you've got to concentrate on. I said, Mrs. Lovett has airs. She wants to be a lady. And I said, if you look at the way Sondheim's written it, and particularly Worst Pies, it keeps going into the soprano register as she puts on these airs. She wants to be respectable. She wants to be loved. All those things are more important than her being an East End Cockney.
She wants status.
Yes.
But it's her version of status.
Exactly. There you go.
You know, she owns a shop. It's a terrible shop. And she knows it, but she's still trying to put on a face. I mean, it's the mask, isn't it? We're all trying to put on a mask. We're all trying to sort of inflate our lives as much as possible and rise to sort of some kind of challenge. And and you know, and ultimately as well, she sees this man, she chooses to ignore all the bad parts about him. She just wants to be needed. And, you know, it's very similar to as Nancy and Oliver, as long as he needs me, I know he's a bad boy, I want him. You know, it's all those sorts of things about being made whole and complete. And she'll go to any lengths to make that happen. And try and justify that as well. To try and justify and ignore the fact that you know, always look on the bright side. All these women, and all these women I've played, all these sort of like Lady of the Lakes and things, you think, yes, you know, we're all trying to be glorious. But actually we're very real, and that's the lovely part, is seeing both sides of that coin, that there's that, and you said at the beginning, the vulnerability, and then the fun and the humility, and knowing that ultimately we're just all doing our best.
You've sold yourself to me. You got the part, Bonnie.
Oh, thank you. Do you know, I mean, Stephen was writing it when we were doing Gypsy for Angela. That's when he said, I want to write this for you.
Wow.
So I sort of feel like it was part of me. So there's all those sorts of things, and I don't know. You never know what's around the corner, do you? You just never know.
And there's
keep going.
Exciting new writing happening as well. And,
exactly.
And I think, you know, thank goodness we have these little theatres in London, you know, like Southwark Playhouse and, well, the Boulevard before it. You know, I hope they're able to keep going. The Boulevard's one of the great tragedies because it had only just opened, you know?
Well, I mean, I think it's just so awful to think that this is dark and down, and you know, what is so frustrating is that we've got invisible handcuffs on because, you know, yes, there is this pandemic out there, we can't deny that, and obviously we don't want people to suffer in any way, shape or form, but usually it's our industry that puts a smile on everyone's face. We're the ones, you know, and when I saw the thing on Britain's Got Talent a few weeks ago that Cameron put out there, I sobbed. I absolutely sobbed. I thought it was so wonderful just because it was basically going, we will not be put down. And I thought, there's no people like show people. We smile when we are low, and everybody's very low, but we're not able to cheer everybody up. We're not able to do what we do. It's almost as if we're being told, yeah, no, you have no use here. But when we do come back, my goodness, are we going to show them? Are we going to show everybody what we've made? And we're going to be able to blast out all this love and feeling and emotion. And I just hope that people will be able to come back, that these venues and that the industry will then thrive once again.
They will,
and that we will be able to contribute. They will. They will. We just have to wait.
Yeah, absolutely. A year is a long time, but it's gone. Time is playing tricks on us at the moment. It seems like 10 years, and other times it seems like yesterday. It's very weird. Now you're gearing up for 2 shows at Crazy Coq's, which
I'm actually going to do 3 now, Edward. 3. I'm going to do 3. Yes, I'm going to do 3 because I've sold out. So that's good.
Well, I've got to come.
Please do.
That's a lovely room. It's so cosy. There's nowhere to hide.
I've never done it before. I've never done Crazy Coq's before.
Lovely room, and you'll have a great. Have you got ideas planned and stuff gelling?
Well, I mean, you know, the thing is, I've done my own version of my own show for many, many years and taken different stories. I'm only able to do an hour, and quite frankly, if I was to do my 50 years in show business, it'd probably take 50 years to get through the whole damn thing, because I do like to chat.
You do?
But, yes, but I'm just going to take some nuggets of different backstage stories and moments across my career and my life. From my perspective, you know, I always like to think that people seem to love to hear. Yeah, I don't think you want your the magic dispelled. You don't want to know how the magic trick is done, but sometimes to know what's been going on behind the scenes makes it even more special to people, especially if they've got their own visions of something that perhaps you've been in or that they know. So there's all that. It's just me and a piano. It's going to be really sort of intimate and chatty. And I've only got an hour because, of course, we're very restricted with time because the venue has to be completely cleaned and sanitised for the next show to come in. And then, of course, we've got this curfew. So we can't overrun. We can't do a Ken Dodd and stay there all night, I'm afraid. No. But it will be lovely to get back to doing something. I don't know how I'll feel. Probably extremely emotional.
Oh, yes.
Yes, because, you know, one thing that my daughter said that was so lovely, because she is studying at London School of Musical Theatre, who have been absolutely brilliant to them. And, you know, we had this break, and she said to me, she said, actually, I think that lockdown was really good for me, because she said, now I know I really want to do it, because I missed it so much. And I said, as long as you're doing it because you want to, because you can't be in an industry as tough as this without knowing that you're not a sort of complete human being without it. And I don't mean that in a kind of egotistical way. It's just something about the oxygen. It gives you oxygen, it gives you life. And so to get back to that again might take my breath away a bit.
Oh, that is such a wonderful way to go out. And wise words. And yeah, well, she's been well taught, hasn't she?
Hope so. She doesn't listen to me. She doesn't listen to a word I say, but hopefully by example I might have shown her a few tricks and how to behave, I hope, at least, if nothing else.
Well, bless you, Bonnie. It's always a pleasure, and I shall be there at Crazy Cox. I'm going to.
Oh, amazing! And if you can't be there, Edward, you can live stream it.
There you are. You do the most elegant plugs as well.
It would be lovely to see you.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Watch me bounce, knock me out with music in great amounts. Oh, let that beat wait. We're gonna have a heat wave. Hit me with a hot note. Hit me with a hot note and watch me bounce.